To the regular Board of Education meeting and ask everyone to join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, the first part of our agenda is recognition. Our new Milford Public School Teacher of the Year, and I would like to turn this over to Superintendent Parker.
Mr. Donahue, would you please come up here and join me? I'm excited to introduce to you our 2019-20 Teacher of the Year for New Milford. Mr. Donahue, the night before he was introduced as Teacher of the Year, and what an amazing man and career he has had with us. And you know, he's only, I say only because some of us have taught for a long time, but he is a second career teacher. And I think that's really powerful when you have experience in the real world and then you make a choice to come and teach. And so he's been with us for 18 years, and that first and foremost is amazing, and we appreciate that. And secondly, he's an incredible math teacher. Besides teaching Algebra 2 and honors and AP Calculus and whatever math class we offer, it seems like. He's also co-advisor of the Gay Straight Alliance, which is awesome. He finds time also to work with the musicals, right, in the theater department. 18 years, and he's a coach. Do you still coach softball and baseball?
I do not coach anymore. Don't have enough hours.
Yeah. But I think, as you can see, we are so blessed to have you in our district. And Morgan Taylor from Ingersoll is here to recognize you as well as our first and most especially, special teacher. Congratulations.
Thank you.
My name is Morgan. I'm from Ingersoll Automotive. Todd Ingersoll is an alumni of Bethel. He just understands that really educators and the people around them supporting them are really the people who drive our community. They make the kids who they are. They're making the next president. That's really what it is. And he wants to give back to the community and let you guys know that, we're here, we support you as well. So we do have this recognition program, and the winner of it, Teacher of the Year, is going to get a 2019 GMC Terrain, and he gets to drive it for the month of October. And it is a special gift that we like to just give back to our teachers and say thanks, and we're here for you if you need us. 84 Federal Road.
Okay, so you get this star.
Awesome. Thank you.
And this is your official recognition from Ingersoll. And then you get this awesome car bag.
That's new.
Good for groceries now. 20 cents. Now you have your own bag. It's perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you, everyone.
And we'll take a short 5-minute break. Please come up and enjoy some refreshments. Okay, and I would like to, at this point, invite anyone from the public who might like to speak. Is there anyone on the list?
Yes, we do have one person, Mr. Brian Woolley.
Hi, my name is Brian Woolley. On behalf of the Band and Color Guard parents and students, I would first like to thank the board members for the previous decisions that were made to continue funding the band programs. As a result of the marching band and color guard are off to a great start this season. Back in August, band camp started 2 weeks before the first day of school. The students rehearsed for a total of 75 hours before school even started. There's 130 students in the band and color guard this season. We will be competing in Class 6A, which is the largest class in U.S. bands. U.S. Bands is a national competitive marching band circuit with over 500 bands participating in 125 shows in 23 states. So far this season, the band has placed first in their class in the first 2 competitions. We traveled to Bethel High School on Saturday, September 7th, and to Brian McMahon High School in Norwalk on September 14th. This Saturday, the 21st, is our home show, starting at 6:30. Our band and guard performs at 8:30. We would love to have you come see the students perform at our home field. This year's theme is the Twilight Zone. Many parents have also volunteered their time to help this year. All the props on the field have been built, painted, and put into place by parents who give up their time in support of this great organization. After our home show this Saturday, the band and guard will be traveling to MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on October 5th to compete in the U.S. Band's Yamaha Cup. There are over 50 bands competing in this event. Thank you so much for supporting music in our schools, and I do hope that you can join us this Saturday. It's a great event, and it's a great way for you guys to see firsthand the result of funding these programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. That's it. Is there anyone else who would like to come up and address the board? Okay. Seeing none, we will move right along to the PTO report. Mandy, thank you.
Hello, welcome back to a new school year. PTO has already been very busy. All of the schools hosted welcome back breakfast or lunch for our wonderful teachers and staff. This year, townwide PTO is continuing the ever-popular monthly spirit days for the K-5 schools on the last Friday of every month. If you happen to walk into Hill and Plain, NES, or Sarah Noble schools on Friday, September 27th, you will likely see some students and staff sporting some wacky, crazy headgear. The K-5 schools have hosted fun welcome back events for the students and families to kick off the brand new year. Picture Day and senior portraits have concluded at the high school, and the K-8 school picture days are underway or scheduled to happen within the next month. Sarah Noble is gearing up for the Booster-thon fun run this week. The students are excited to try their best to run all 35 laps. Hill and Plain is going to host a fun run for their students at the beginning of October. Northville and SMS are currently running catalog fundraisers to help families start their holiday shopping. At the high school, the PTO is getting ready to help the students celebrate Spirit Week and homecoming with a little friendly competition to see which class has the most fabulous-looking rotunda in the school. The theme is decades, with each class representing a decade in history, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Townwide PTO is also working hard to build up the scholarship fund. We are selling our ever-popular discount cards while supplies last, and Dr. Parker has graciously agreed to team up with the PTO for a membership campaign among the staff. Dr. Parker will be providing lunch to the school with the best staff participation in PTO membership. Did you know that you can find us on Facebook? Each school PTO has a Facebook page. I encourage you to follow us on Facebook. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Mandy. Okay, and our student reps are not here this evening. They will be joining us at our next meeting, right? And so we will move on to the approval of minutes. I need a motion to approve the following Board of Education meeting minutes, regular meeting minutes, August 20th, 2019.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Angie?
No, not these, sorry.
Not these? Okay. Well,
Oh, okay, I guess I do want to make a comment, sorry.
okay.
The Committee on Learning meeting, we had talked briefly about some of the backlog of the curriculum that has been written but not approved, and I don't feel that's adequately reflected in the minutes, like the depth of that conversation, there's just like one little line. So I would like to have that elaborated a little bit.
Amended for the Committee on Learning
Correct.
minutes. Okay. JT, Committee on Learning?
I mean, that's something we can do. This motion is just to approve the regular board minutes. That doesn't necessarily encapsulate the
But we
subcommittees.
don't vote on the subcommittee
Correct.
minutes, so we
Correct.
have to capture it under this.
Yeah,
Right.
We don't vote on the other minutes, so do you have, is there something in particular you want added?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about we numbered how many curriculum are behind, we talked about how far behind we were, some of the reasoning for that, and it just briefly mentions in there, about, some of them are old or something like that, so I would just like that expanded upon.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think it actually, we're in some bit of a place where we actually have detail from that meeting too, because that was one of the
video.
few meetings we have video for that
Yes.
subcommittee. So, I mean, if the board would allow us to, we could revise that and bring it back together, I'd work with Pat on that. It's something we can do just to embellish, not embellish, but, provide a little, no, but, provide a little more information.
Not quite what I
For
had in
that
mind,
context, no, and that's interesting too, maybe that's a conversation, policy chairs, or, subcommittee chairs could have too, about, usually we're trying to turn the minutes pretty quickly, because if there are motions in there, we want to turn them pretty quick.
Right.
But maybe there could be a mechanism by which the subcommittee could also get, crack at it too. I know that hasn't been the practice, but, because I'm not, chairs aren't necessarily trying to shut out the
Right.
members, but we are also under, the timeline to try to
constraint, yes.
post. So maybe that could be a process moving forward.
okay.
Okay.
Wendy, did you have something?
Oh, just for point of clarification, we do not approve subcommittee minutes, and the role of the chair of each committee is to review those minutes and post them, and we're required just to post the actions and any motion, which we do. We do try and capture the commentary. In this particular case, our minutes tonight, under the discussion, under our motions, can carry some of that, and perhaps those minutes can be adjusted and
And then
reposted.
followed up at the next meeting, so we can all take a look at them and make sure that they're satisfied. Does that sound fair?
Well, the board doesn't really weigh in on them.
But it's good for them
but
to look
it-
again and see what was changed to make sure that it's accurately reflected.
But anytime that minutes are posted, the board weighs in on it.
Yep.
That's why that they're enclosed, so we're covering it through this process.
Okay. Okay, is that satisfactory? We can do that? Okay. Okay, so, any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstained? Passes unanimously, thank you. And we will move on to the superintendent's report.
I just have a few items. I wanted to first address the issues related to last week and the restrooms at the high school and the vaping issue, which is the reason we have had the issue, I guess, with the restrooms being closed. And I have some data I just wanted to share with you to follow up on that as far as how many restrooms are open. And we have 9 restrooms total for boys and 9 restrooms for girls and 1 gender-neutral restroom. So there are plenty of restrooms all over the school. I walked the high school yesterday and looked at the restrooms myself. Not all of them. I looked at the girls' restrooms. And Mr. Shagru went into the boys' restrooms. We looked at the staff restrooms. We looked at every restroom in the high school. And I also wanted you to have the data that I had regarding vaping incidents last year, because I'm not sure you have that information. And so, anytime we have an issue, not everybody is disciplined for that because we may not catch them. But there are 60 discipline records related to vaping last year. And that's a lot, because you figure that's how many were caught. And today alone, at the high school, there were 13 incidents in one day. So there's still an issue. Closing the restrooms may not necessarily be the answer. Mr. Shagru and I have talked a lot about their plans they have for educating the students, educating the parents, educating the community, and this is just the beginning of it. And I know, obviously, nationally, it's a crisis, and it's not okay. They're doing their best to monitor the restrooms, but there are only so many people, and we can't necessarily put 18 people at a station all day long to monitor that. And that's, if it's vaping now, what was it, 50 years ago? It's always an issue in the restrooms, and we know that. So I just wanted you to know that it's a constant battle everywhere, and I wanted to close that loop with you on the numbers that I had. Do you have any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
Normally, under a report, we don't go back and forth with questions, but I think it's important to have this dialogue. I would encourage the board, if we do feel that there's questions, that we would amend the agenda and add it on for another discussion and properly warn the public that we're going to have this discussion.
Okay.
And I would welcome that motion to amend the agenda to add on the discussion of vaping and our protocol to this agenda, if I could get a second to do that. Second. And I would add it prior to, since we do have public here, rather than have them wait until the end of the meeting, we would, my goal would be to allow board commentary, and thank you for that. So I just, in case board members do have questions, sometimes this is the proper way to do it. I would add it probably before discussion and possible action. I'd like to add it as the first item if we could, so we could have that public discussion. So we have a motion to add it. We need 2/3 to amend the agenda. It's not a special meeting. We may do so. And we have a second. So you'll
Okay,
need to call
so
that.
would we like to, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay?
Thank you for
So
that
we will add
privilege.
that, right after 9, before 10. Is
And
that-
hold the discussion to that protocol. That would be
Correct.
great.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
And then I have a few other things. You may be aware that we have some curriculum nights going on, started last week and still going strong, so I look forward to attending those. I was lucky enough to attend last night with Laura Olson, Director of SPED, and the supervisors. We met with an informal group of parents, special education parents at the Children's Creative Movement Center. Is that the name of it?
Children's Movement Center.
Children, well, it was creative.
Yeah, it was.
Children.
They'll change their name
And
now.
it's
That
really
sounds good.
loud, okay? But it's awesome, and I was quite excited. I want to do the zip line. But maybe we need to do a board meeting at the Children's Movement Center. So anyway, that was a very, very powerful meeting, and I appreciated the dialogue, and I appreciated, Laura, you and your people attending. I thought that was really nice. And finishing the meeting, because then I got to excuse myself and go to the PTO meeting, which was amazing. We are so blessed to have such an incredible PTO. Besides, I saw the numbers, but being there last night and just hearing from them, wow, we are a lucky, lucky district. And then I just want to share with you that what makes my day so special is at least once a day, I'm able to get into schools, and I have made 17 school visits so far this year. And so the kids are getting used to me, the teachers are getting used to me. It's amazing, and there's nothing better. It's a lot easier to stay in your office and keep working, but I got to visit with Ann, just spur of the moment. I got to visit with Greg yesterday. It just makes for really powerful conversations. So I appreciate Pat keeping me scheduled, and I told her it's a priority of mine. We have 5 schools. I can do one a day. Sometimes I have to do 2, but it doesn't take long. And I'm blessed. I appreciate this job. I appreciate being able to see our students and our teachers, and we have some powerful things going on in this district. So thank you.
Thank you. The board chair report, just have a couple of items. Wanted to thank everyone in facilities, for working so hard over the summer preparing our schools, for our student staff and our families. I had the pleasure with some other board members to go visit our schools right before they opened, and they just looked fantastic. They were very shiny. It looked like you could ice skate on the floors. It was just really nice, and I know that that's a lot of hard work, and I know this building in particular created some additional issues with the roof going on, but I have to tell you that the schools just look great. So Kevin, please tell your staff that we are always so grateful for the work that they do. I would also like to thank our teachers and staff for all their work preparing for the return of our students and families in time for the open houses and walkthroughs that occurred the day before classes began. I was able to attend a couple of those as well for my children, and they were very well attended, and the teachers were very prepared and engaged and happy to meet the families. So thank you to them. I would like to say, and I know we always do this, and I'm going to follow up with Dr. Parker, a special thanks to our PTOs who provided fantastic welcome back events for our staff at our schools. A lot of hard work goes into planning these events, and the staff is so appreciative, and a lot of our families donate items to these events. So, it really is a community effort, and we are always thankful to our PTOs for the hard work they do. They're planning their calendars for the year. There's a lot going on. I hope that everybody has a chance to go out and attend some of the great events that do take place. So thank you to our PTOs and all of our families for all the hard work that goes into running their initiatives. And last, any board member wanting to participate in the upcoming CABE convention in Mystic on November 15th and 16th can contact the superintendent's office so that they can get you registered. And if they can know by October 15th, that would be great. And that is all I have. And we will move on to committee and liaison reports, starting with Brian with facilities.
Sure. We had a very productive meeting on last Tuesday. On our agenda for tonight is we are going to discuss Celtic Energy, and I won't say too much about it, but they are proposing to work with the schools in the town to help monitor and aid us with our energy usage and efficiency of that. We also on tonight's agenda is we're going to request a 5-year capital. We're going to request a withdrawal from our capital reserve to complete some of the projects in our 5-year capital plan. We also discussed the turf field usage, and currently we are losing money in our turf field usage. So we are going to look at ways where we can either capitalize on the advertising of those fields, or we're going to look into how we can balance that so we do not take a loss. It's not a big loss, but it is still a loss. And so we will be speaking with Mr. Segru and Mr. Lipinski to see how we can balance that.
Great, thank you. Wendy, operations.
Okay, so operations also is a full agenda, and you'll see many things on here for discussion and action. We'll not be taking action on the monthly reports and things of that nature. They're on for item of discussion as well as personnel. Many of the items that come through facilities, often because there's a financial component, will cross through operations. So we cover those discussions in both committees, which I think is a great check and balance. I think it works quite nicely. And so we also discuss Celtic Energy. We have tuition rates that we'll be approving. We have the graduation date, which is June 20th at 2 o'clock. Should it pass, the board will be posting that, and that's early and helpful, so we appreciate that. And also the capital reserve request is on here. So for action, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I missed. The Hill and Plain, we're looking at Excel, the need for that. We'll have that discussion and see where that goes this evening. We've been presented that information and addressing the numbers there to see if we can certainly support that request. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Thank you. Okay, policy subcommittee, that's me. There are 8 policies that are on the agenda tonight for revision and approval. There is 1331 smoking, 4112.5 criminal histories inquiries, 4118.232 smoking, 5114 removal, suspension, expulsion, 5118 non-resident students, 5118.1 homeless students, 5141.21 administration of medication, and 6111 school calendar. These policy changes are required by statute, and therefore, Board Policy 9311 allows the Board of Education to approve these policies at the initial presentation, which is the presentation that's taking place this evening. So the board will be weighing in, if they so desire, on these policies, because it will be the one and only time they see it. And the following policies were discussed at the Policy Committee for review: 1700, possession of firearms on school property prohibited, and 1800, animals on school property. The next Policy Committee meeting is on October 1st. So we'll see these policies a little later on in the meeting. And that's it for me. And Committee on Learning, JT.
Thanks, Tammy. Committee on Learning, we had 4 curricula. I want to thank Alicia for so aptly and ably presenting the 4 curricula. We are used to having curriculum writers come present, but I don't know if it was short notice or just logistics didn't work out for some of the writers, but it actually worked out fine though. And I think the members of the committee appreciated that. And we were able to get through 4 curricula. Those are the 4 you'll see tonight. Creative writing, diverse voices, U.S. History College Prep, U.S. History Honors. One interesting piece that we learned was even just coupling the U.S. histories. One thing Alicia has really pushed for is if you're going to write the curriculum for a college prep course, you also do the honors or vice versa, right? So it's really important, I think, to be sure you have common assurances across curricula. So that's a good practice that we're maintaining. And as we move forward, I think that's always important because I think it helps structure the need to know for all students, kind of the nice to know and the really need to know maybe for your honors and maybe even AP level. So it was nice to see that and kind of a side-by-side comparison while we reviewed those. So you'll see those 4 curricula that are up for review tonight.
Thank you, JT.
Thanks.
Eileen, at Advanced.
At Advanced, okay. The student handbook is up for approval in October, so we are looking at a final review of that. There's 88,000 homes got the adult education catalog in this area. Westcon terminated their service agreement with At Advanced in the early childhood and family program, and that was in the Danbury location. But about 50% of those kids that were out of that program have been placed other places. The annual meeting's in October. They're trying to get more attended, so they're putting in educational seminars there. So anybody who thinks they want to go to Plymouth, Connecticut at 7:45 in the morning is welcome. But, okay, and they're subleasing the Danbury space. They feel the Danbury building isn't being used. This is what the minutes said. I was talking to our expert here, but they are hiring a real estate agent to look at the space down in Danbury and sublease it to other people. They have a new tech person there, as we do, and they're focusing on ransomware security threats that have affected many schools in our area. And the yearly budget is to be presented in October, because for the September meeting, it was quote-unquote up in the air right now. Doesn't that sound familiar? So October is when they'll present their budget. Thank you.
And Mr. Lawson isn't here for K, but I did mention the convention that's coming up. If any board members are interested, to please let Superintendent's office know and that we can get you registered. And Eileen, you again for Magnet School.
Magnet School, okay, in response to Angie's question last meeting that we had 17 people and we have 18 spaces. We're working, Anthony and I are working on that thing, and October 3rd is their advisory committee, and that's the place where letting go of a space would be brought up. And do we have a waiting list for New Milford? Don't we have a waiting list? So we're working on ironing that out, and we'll hopefully have that done by the October 3rd meeting and present what we want to do happen, if we need to give up something or keep the 18th position. And is there a waiting list for New Milford? And can it be filled, and when can it be filled? What's their time frame for filling it? So there'll be more information next month after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move to the added agenda item 9A, vaping discussion.
the vaping protocol and procedure. Since I added it, I'll be the first to say, but I
you.
saw it when you had given your report that hands had kind of gone up, and I think this is the more appropriate way to at least have some of the discussion. I'm just speaking for myself, because you had mentioned that you were closing the loop of a lot of information, and normally the board is not involved in those procedures. They're advised of those procedures, so I wanted to make that clear. For me personally, I quite frankly support the initiative of recognizing that this is a huge problem. It is a national problem, and it is something that all communities should be recognizing, and I hope that they do. And so I think this discussion is really healthy. I did have some concerns when all of this had rolled out, but I think it warrants the larger discussion, and even if the board does not play a role in directly coordinating what we do and how we do it, we certainly have input, and we oversee how this goes. I would encourage the conversations of, as you mentioned, we've always had some issues of something going on to some degree, but this causes light to a much larger conversation, and it's going to take the entire community. It's not going to take, the initiative of looking at facilities and closing them down or doing this or doing that, and I'm not quite sure the venue for that, but I would like to know, when you had given us some of the discipline numbers, that's the first that I've heard of them. So I think that we need to begin this conversation and be aggressive on it.
Oh, Joe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's kind of ironic that our smoking policies came before us for approval today. And Dr. Parker, you said there were 13 incidents today. Mr. Shagru, how many incidents have we had to address so far this year?
Around 20 or so.
I know we have somewhat of an education program on these issues, whether it's being health or other programs. Is the information or getting out there the problems here? I mean, we've had 7 student deaths in the United States to this just recently. And is the point getting across with us doing some form of discipline with these in these incidents or discussion? I mean, what other than their fact being incidents, what do we proactively do?
Sure. Well, like I said, in the focus group that we have with the students last year, one of the things that they identified 2 things really was the education and how they were marketing this as a safer alternative for smoking, and we all know that now, and it's obviously drawing national attention because of the deaths and the things that are bubbling to the surface now with this. So that was one issue that we talked about, and the other one was obviously security and providing laboratories for their intended purposes for our student body. With respect to the education, one of our students, I thought, did a nice job of trying to capture some of the problems. Not only was it lack of education on our students' part, but it was a lack of awareness and education on some of the adults in the community as well. Because when we were talking to parents, they're like, oh, well, at least it's not smoking. They were poo-pooing it, thinking it was, again, a safer alternative to smoking. So we're trying to send out some literature. I did that on the first day of school. I sent out a tip sheet from how to deal with and have difficult conversations with your students. I also sent out a letter written by the Surgeon General discussing and talking about the warnings. The plan is to continue those throughout the year to just keep the issue on the front burner. Also, we're trying to raise awareness, obviously, in our health classes. We're talking about doing some different things on the horizon within our advisory classes to increase awareness and the education of this, of the dangers of it.
If we see a reduction in incidents, then I would assume we're starting to get the message across.
Are we seeing a reduction in incidents?
If we see a reduction.
Well,
If not, then we're gonna have to take a stronger approach, perhaps.
Yes. I mean, I can sit here and hypothesize of how it's going to happen, but it's going to take more than sending home some flyers to parents to increase and to improve the statistics. That's for sure, in my opinion. We've created And this is not something that is germane to New Milford High School, please understand. I mean, I've having conversations with my colleagues in the league and around the state, and every school is grappling with this in certain measures and trying to install some protocols and some things in place to try to curb this. This has everyone scratching their head. I don't know if when the laws go into effect October 1st with 21, if that's going to help. I hope it does. The skeptic in me doubts it, but we shall see. Thank you.
My question was, you gave us a lot of numbers here, but the monitor, how many monitors do we have and how do they rotate?
We have 3 inside for 19 bathrooms.
I would just like to add on to something that Mr. Shagru said. You know, we can send home as much literature as we need and so forth. I'm glad we're reaching out to other schools to find out maybe some of the things that they're doing. But I think that our education in to the members of our community, both parents and non-parents, about what is going on, because down the road there might be a price tag to the things that we need to do to keep these schools safe, whether that be detectors, whether that be additional staff. But the bottom line is there are kids that are dying from vaping, and you know, it's not a safe alternative to smoking. And you know, so I just am hoping that we do keep this conversation going and that we do include the community so that they do know that what we're up against with this crisis.
Well, we've had 2 students already that we've had to call their parents in that were ill because of this, and had to have their parents come in and pick them up. And that's, thank goodness it was just that, and it wasn't something more serious, obviously.
One last thing, just procedurally, and I appreciate the board adding this to their agenda for a discussion because it's worthy of a discussion.
Absolutely.
Rather than a report. And I'm going to be very delicate when I say this, but I feel the need to say this. When we had a recent protocol in trying to address this, we had some pushback because perhaps, you know, there was some surprises or concerns or all of the above. But at the end of the day, I think regardless of what board members had heard and what was going on and what was covered, the most important message is that there is a message. And the message is we need to address it. And I'm hoping that prior to budget, if there are any budgetary implications or protocols that we need to visit prior to putting our budget together, rather than doing it in a vacuum and having it, and I don't mean that again, you know, that we can gather that information, and facilities also could take a look at. We know that there are vaping monitors and in other districts. We know what the average cost is. There's pros and cons to those. There's a sensitivity factor. There's a variety when I've researched all of that, what those are. But I do think that with budget approaching and in light of this conversation, we should keep the conversation going. And if there are some protocols that, you know, we need to look at and we should be looking at, I think at the very least, on an informational basis, have this come to facilities with possible price tags attached prior to budget to give our schools the support they need.
Angie.
Just curious, you had mentioned parents. Have you heard from a lot of parents? Are parents supportive? What's the vibe from the parents?
Greg, before you answer, I just want to tell you that I sent home the school messenger letting them know. And of course, that was my first school messenger. Pat has seen many school messengers, and she said there has never been a response like the response to this. I don't know, 15 or more responses with people saying, I get it, I'm sorry, but my bigger issue is we have to do something. And so it was really overwhelming for me that they're responding to the school messenger message. So go ahead, Greg.
During this ordeal, I had one conversation with a student that came to speak with me, and we explained what we were trying to do based on some of the focus groups. In the spring, I think it's important to understand the context. In the spring and throughout last year, we were having an issue with vaping. We were doing suspensions, calling home, students going to the nurse's office. We were getting calls from parents of the students that couldn't get into the bathroom saying, do something. Do something. We started research. Mr. Lee did a tremendous job when he was here filling in for Mr. Williams in the spring, did some research in other districts. I went to different meetings, those types of things. In the spring, we also had a focus group with our students, and we had some teachers show up there. I had conversations with parents, not a focus group, but informally at different events that I'm at, kind of picking their brain and what the types of things. And the vibe was to do something. And that's when we came up with the two-prong attack to educate and to restrict. Fast forward to the fall, that information went out, told people what we were trying to do. The backlash, here was the backlash. Again, I had one conversation with a student that wanted to understand why. That student was wonderfully mature, didn't necessarily like it, but she understood it and understood that there was a problem that we were trying to address. She left. In the first 4 days, I had 4 emails from 4 different parents. We have over 3,000 parents represented in the high school. I had 4 emails. One of those parents I invited to come in because we're going back and forth. We had a very good dialogue. Again, he left. He didn't particularly like what we were doing, but he understood what we were doing. When it went to the news, that's when I got 4 additional emails, maybe 5, and that was it. So we have about 3,000 parents, and I had less than 10 emails voicing their concerns. So I think we also need to understand the context. I always say, don't let the facts get in the way of a good conversation. What was stated on the news was grossly inaccurate, but that, I think, hopefully that addresses your question relative to kind of the input that I was getting.
Yeah, and I, just my opinion, we did get that email, and I do remember getting it. I do vaguely remember seeing it, but something of that magnitude maybe warrants its own little memo, just that last sentence in there, all by itself. Because you did give parents an opportunity beforehand, and I appreciate that. But it was kind of buried in that email, and I don't know if the response would have been different. I mean, clearly it wasn't an overwhelming response, even though I did have family in another state call and like, what's going on in New Milford? I'm like, oh.
And I appreciate that feedback, but one of the things that I do know, and I'm sure the other principals here and even central office will know, is it doesn't seem to matter what type of correspondence goes out. I can send out a letter with the where's, why's, how comes in bold-faced type, and I still get people going, I didn't know.
I know.
So you're
can't
damned if you do,
communicate enough.
damned if you don't.
I know.
I tried to express in my letter the sense of urgency, the crisis that we were dealing with at New Milford High School, and the crisis that seems to be upon us in our community, in our nation. In hindsight, perhaps maybe, and I appreciate the feedback that I should have elaborated a little bit more, but I'm cognizant of the fact of the things that I go out, it amazes me, the questions I get, or the lack of response based on whether it's too short, not too long, or whatever.
And can I just follow up really quick? I know you had in previous years gone to like the Rotary and the Lions Club and things for different reasons. Are you, if you're still doing that, would this be something, a message you would carry to them and ask for their support and help in?
Yes.
Thank you.
JT?
Thanks, Tammy. I appreciate, too, the discussion about protocol and policy, right? Because as a board, we got ahead of this a few years ago in revising our policy. And I believe we took a really forward-facing stance to categorize vaping devices as drug paraphernalia, which a lot of districts were not doing and still have not done because they were leery of what would be. And one of the ways we kind of future-proofed that in our language was to say any device capable of, vaporizing, liquids, no matter what that liquid was, whether it was,
Bubble gum or
exactly, right? So, and that again, not knowing what was next, right? Because we've really seen, these devices evolve quickly, right? I actually appreciate the fact that now it's actually making the news 2 years later after this really, sharp uptick, whereas traditional smoking was years before this happened. So I think it's, incumbent upon our schools to really continue to push that educational prong that you talk about, Greg, right? And that, we are a school, and it is about educating, right? And I think it's imperative that we try to debunk that myth that safer is safe, right? That there's a substitution effect. Well, it's okay if they're not smoking, they're vaping, it's not as bad. And teenagers will say, oh, well, it's safe then, right? And I think we need to underscore the point, we're not saying it's safe, right? Well, it might be safer than other things, but you weren't even smoking to begin with, right? You know, so we've got a whole class of kids now that are smoking. So, but we're not calling it smoking, we're calling it vaping, and we don't even know what's next. So, I think it's absolutely terrifying as a parent, as a teacher, you know, to see this. And I will say, it is incredibly hard to police this, right? So the other thing I would suggest is, you know, taking a look at the policy revisions we had instituted a few years back now, and to really have a more formal dialogue and maybe even reporting mechanism for the board to understand what's working. Have we made that policy so untenable? Because at the end of the day, administration is doing their darndest to really meet the policy that we have instituted in some kind of protocol, right? And I you know, again, the public will say policy, and for us, we mean like capital P policy versus like lowercase p policy. So the protocol or the way that policy is being interpreted and trying to be enforced, I think is where the rubber meets the road in the trenches. So I think it would be incumbent upon the board to really get some more information. Is it working? And to Wendy's point, what might we be able to do to better support that that education for our students, but also the health of our students at the end of the day. So, thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Just, policy is good and communications is good, but to me, at that age that we're dealing with at the high school, peer pressures is the best thing possible. So could we get PTO into some kind of peer pressure project, button say I won't vape or whatever? Just, I would think that would be a good way to go. Kids reading things, kids education in health classes is all great, but if you get some peer pressure going, I would think it would be most effective at that age. Thank you.
I guess this is I'm going to dovetail on what Wendy said earlier. It'd be nice to know what we as a board can do at budget season, but even earlier than budget season. Do we have vape detectors in the high school bathrooms? No. And they're expensive. And also maybe even cameras in certain spots.
Yes, they have some pros and cons depending on who I've spoken to and the cost factor and some of the sensitivities to them. But I think that that's part of the larger discussion before we need to see if we're missing something, and something at least on a facility basis or staff basis or whatever. What do we have that we might be able to do better to shore up some of this? And I didn't mean to cut it, because it's not just going to be the Board of Education that solves this. Yep. It's going to be our community that works as a team. We're one piece of the puzzle, period.
Brian, do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
Anyone else?
Thank you for the conversation. And thank you.
I'm the only one who didn't say anything.
I appreciate the conversation. I just need you to know that. And Greg and I yesterday had a very powerful conversation and are looking and brainstorming as well, so.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to number 10, discussion and possible action. We have policies for approval, and I'm not sure if the board would like to take these one at a time.
I was going to ask you, do these as consent, or do you hear any objection from the board to do them individually?
Exactly, so I'm just looking for some direction from the board about if we want to take them one at a time.
Okay.
Or if we want to
We can do them all together?
take them all together?
Yep.
Okay. So I do need a motion to approve the following policies in accordance with Board Bylaw 9311, 1331 smoking, 411.
I have a quick question. Do we have to suspend 9311? We're just going to do it in accordance with conjunction of 9311? Okay, go ahead, I apologize.
That is okay. 4112.5 criminal history inquiries, 4118.232 smoking, 5114 removal, suspension, expulsion, 5118 non-resident students, 5118.1 homeless students, 5141.21 administration of medication, and 6111 school calendar. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who was the first? Brian and Wendy, okay. Any discussion?
One comment.
Go ahead.
I just recently read something with regard to school boards updating, revising their policies, procedures, and I believe that we here in New Milford stay on top of this and go through this, and there's two benefits. One, getting ahead of the curve, and two is keeping us from ending up in litigation on something that we didn't do correctly, so.
Thank you, that's very true.
Comment out to the policy committee.
JT?
I echo that too, seeing the mailbag from Tom Mooney, you know, it's good to see. I know some districts that are in that boat, that are not, and that can be really hard, the expulsion hearings, you know, there's a whole host of issues that give rise to that. I also appreciate too, Dr. Parker, the fact that we're able to kind of bring these back through and loop quickly back to full board with legal counsel's opinion or additional commentary to help the board, you know, see these through. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we are on B, approval of the following curricula. And again, do we want to take these all at once, or do we want to parcel them out? Any objection taking them all at once? Okay,
I don't have an objection, I just have a couple questions.
Okay.
It's not agenda in general.
okay, so I need a motion to approve the following curricula: creative writing, diverse voices, U.S. History College Prep, and U.S. History Honors.
So moved. Second.
Okay,
Discussion. Wendy?
question. So I was not at Committee on Learning and I didn't see the video, so I apologize very much. I didn't stay. Are these in the classroom right now?
So teachers wrote the curriculum, they have a draft.
Right?
Some of these curriculum rewrites were done a long time ago. So they're not even connected to the most recent standards of practice.
Right.
So certainly if you're a teacher who's written the curriculum and you have it in draft form, you could be instituting some parts of a unit within your classroom. But my office has not distributed the curriculum. It still has draft. that doesn't get lifted nor distributed until the board approves the curriculum.
Right, that's exactly where I'm going. So my concern is how many, if we're using pieces of it, if you will, or portions of it are being taught, and we're waiting for the board to approve it, how many more of these do we have that are in that situation?
So we're caught up in terms of, you're now looking at the curriculum that, you're rounding the corner, I should say, to the curriculum that were written over the summer months, so those would be coming forward. Right now, you're looking at the curriculum that were written in the spring, which really is at the close of last school year before we trained and did the curriculum writing in the summer. And the reason for that is it also, we talked about this a little bit at budget time with the review of the curriculum, seeing as though I have to review every piece of curriculum. We go back and forth between the writers and myself. There's a period of time that we both need to get the curriculum to its best state before it comes before the board. And so shortening the timeline, in effect, wouldn't help the writer in order to provide them with the opportunity to get the rewrite up to par.
Right. If I could just for my own, first of all, I want to be very clear. I think our curriculum is amazing. I think that what our staff does is amazing. I have a problem with some of the procedure on this. I'm hopeful that we can kind of get in front of the time frame, that we have an opportunity to have this before, you know, they're being. Is there ever an opportunity that we can kind of get in front of the date on this?
You know, Alicia, I want to step in for just a second because it was my first Committee on Learning last week. Was it only last week?
Right.
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
And so I had questions about our procedures and where we're at, and it's what I believe and what I have seen, and based on my conversations with Alicia, is there has been so much
Absolutely.
depth of rewriting
I
and
would
revision, and she has just really light speed brought us up to par. And I think the catch-up has happened to where now we're going to be in a better place as soon as we get all of those done, that we're going to be on a better standard as far as what we spoke about, a timeline for not being delayed as much. Of course, when it happens, and I think this was delayed too because we didn't have the Committee on Learning for 2 months. But I really want to commend the district on the cleanup that has happened. And I really believe that, and you can pick up the answer to your question, but I feel good, at least as far as based on our conversation following the curriculum on learning, that we're getting through that cleanup phase.
just to put it into perspective, I went back to my office just to see, would it make a difference if I were just the person who was bringing forward 6 curriculum at a time? So as not to overload the Committee on Learning, because that's a lot of reading.
It is.
It's a lot of dense reading. At about 5 to 6 a meeting, we're not really, it's going to still take us about the same length of time as if we had presenters before us. We maybe will get into more each time. To be honest with you, I'm still vetting curriculum from the summer, and we're launching the writing for the fall.
That's exactly what I hear.
And as I said in Committee on Learning, it's a wonderful problem to have because we have teachers rising to the occasion during a time when it's incredibly busy. It never stops over the course of the school year. To take the time to thoroughly record what they believe to be what all students need to be able to do before they leave us. And that is a lot of commitment. They go through training. I put them through training, the writing. So I think, to answer your question, I don't really think we can go much further. I don't know if there'll ever be a time where we're completely caught up. I think we're going to get really close, and then we're going to get another influx of, if we're lucky, another 16 curricula that will come up for rewrite. The good news is that we're making a lot of headway in aligning curriculum, some curricula that have not been written. When I look back at the level of curriculum that was coming forward to Committee on Learning at a time when the standards weren't as rigorous, to look at what it was then and to look at it now, I mean, we've come leaps and bounds. And we're just doing more justice to all the kids that are passing through our doors every day and giving them exposure. And I understand your concern about, is it board approved or is it not? But if we have classrooms where curriculum has been written since 2002, 2003, 2007, because we haven't been able to get the writers at the table, they need to be teaching to the new standards under the state, so they have to make adjustments. And if they're capturing their best efforts in the classroom and then memorializing it in our curriculum, that's, I think, the most that we could ask for.
I understand. And I appreciate that. I look at it a little bit differently. I think that sometimes the board is often, not often, but once in a while put in situations where approving situations or something that perhaps after the fact, or in the middle of the fact. But I want to be very clear. I'm well aware of the hard work being done at Committee on Learning in your office. I just struggle with that procedure. I think the entire board is well aware of that. I look at procedure and, I go a little like, what are we doing? So I just want to because I wasn't there. I don't know. I didn't see. I'm hearing, some other things, and I wanted to hear for myself.
I appreciate that, and I want you to know that, we didn't really have an avenue for piloting previous, and everything that we've ever piloted, I've always brought forth to the board in advance. So I would never bring forward a course or tell you after the fact that it was a pilot when it wasn't. And so each of these was simply a revision. And I will do the best I can to speed up the process and get as many before you as we can without overloading. And JT and I will have that conversation on Thursday about how many is too many as we move
You've got a lot in this
ahead.
packet, so for October, so.
Just a point of clarification. So when there is a pilot going on, is that only in the classroom of the teacher that wrote the curriculum, or is that in all sections of that same subject being taught?
So we haven't really piloted any curriculum. We've piloted, I shouldn't say that. The only curriculum we piloted, you've known about in advance. So science is an example of that. So we piloted science curriculum. You were aware that we were doing that. We made a move. We piloted phonics curriculum. You were aware of that. We tested it in certain classrooms. To answer your question, we gathered data on it. We looked at teacher data. Was it usable to them? We looked at it from all those vantage points before we moved forward globally to put it in the hands of all teachers.
But that's a little bit different than curriculum. A program to me is
Those were curriculum too, though.
Okay, so at the high, so my question, at the high school, JT teaches honors creative writing and I teach honors creative writing. He wrote the curriculum. He's using pieces of that. My kids are being tested on the same subject, the same test, but he's got a different curriculum than I have. That's my concern, is the inconsistency in the curriculum.
So the curriculum would be the same, but what teachers provide for lessons to kids always has variation, and I think JT could speak to that. That we're not looking to police, because teachers are allowed to have academic leeway in how they're presenting material, because they're basing it on where kids are to get them to where they need to be. So in every classroom, there's variation, but generally speaking, it's the writer of the curriculum that may be trying out some different ideas as they're writing it. that they would be sharing with their colleagues, and everyone may be moving forward with that idea and testing it out together. But that's not something that I certainly police. As they're writing the curriculum, and as we're doing walkthroughs in classrooms in general over the course of the year, we're looking at what do kids know after going through that lesson? How can they chart their own learning and tell us what they need and where they need to go? So it's never, I mean, to answer your question, that they're all teaching, they should all be teaching from the old curriculum if it's aligned to the most recent standards. If it's not, they're still required to teach to the new standards, but they might be doing it without a curriculum because all of our state testing is aligned to those new standards. Does that make sense?
Okay. It's not a problem. Today.
I think it's always important for us too, as a board, to remember the idea between written curriculum and delivered curriculum, right? And we want to make sure the two of those don't live so far apart and drift so far apart that what's authored and what's written is not what actually is being delivered in a class. And to Angie's point, the 2 classes, 3 classrooms, 4 classrooms aren't drifting so far apart that it's not even true to that document anymore. I also think it's important, even for a lot of these documents, to almost put draft on the top of them, because, you know, there is no curriculum that lives on a shelf and it's all just that. You know, it's always kind of evolving. Especially, we see some of the curricula were really neat with, you know, the resources they're using are so dynamic, right? That it's not just a static, oh, it's that textbook we're using. Like, I've got to think that course is not just using that textbook. There's other supplementary resources, and you always want to be pliable and flexible
That is
for
something we
teachers to
wrestle
honor that
with.
craft.
That's something we wrestle with, because that is a living curriculum, and that's what we want, that's what we strive to have.
Yep.
But I haven't gone down that road because of the level of board approval that's required, and to make sure that, as you said, once the curriculum is written, that is the way it's living in classrooms. It's that deliberate addressing of the standards in curriculum that we need to look for once you've approved it.
That's right.
Until that happens, it's teaching to the standards, whatever that looks like in that classroom.
Can I also add, you get 3 months of unsolicited ideas that I'll give you. And one would be, maybe for this, is a workshop model for curriculum. So let's say there was a big, you know, bevy of activity towards the end of the summer, and a lot of curriculum is ready, or a lot is vetted, and it's kind of on the docket. Perhaps we almost look at like a retreat model, where we step, you know, the COL steps out and gets through a whole bunch of curriculum in a day. You know, you feed us lunch, and then guess what? Now, we could use that as a subcommittee meeting for COL, you know, notice it, know that. But we could really have then, comes to the full board, almost like a consent agenda. Okay, these 12 or 16 curricula have all been vetted by COL, and we've hashed that out. And now, or even something happens earlier, if there's need for revisions, and then we could really move through a lot of curriculum in short order. So that's one thing. Another thing, while I'm at it, we talked about this, and maybe the face pages on curricula. The face page will list board members and superintendents, and we talked about this actually at the meeting.
Right.
And this board is, let's say, we're kind of in the midst of approving 4 curricula right now. We're close to it. The people who are approving this may not actually be the people who are named in the document.
Maybe write draft on it.
Right. But I
know what
mean,
you're saying.
to that point, like Dr. Parker is not listed on here, but she's at the table and she's seen this curriculum. But Dr. Tracy is listed as the superintendent of record, right? So timeline-wise, I think it would be important for us to say, okay, the people who are at the table approving it should be the names there. But I know it's been past practice, and we talked about this, right? So it would be moving away from that practice. But again, I think, because you could have people's names on there that say, oh, you approved this curriculum. I said, no, I didn't approve that curriculum. I was cycled off the board, and I'm sorry. Or the superintendent was not on the hook for that necessarily, because it wasn't your curriculum. But anyway, that would be that's another unsolicited suggestion you're just going to get. So those are my I'm good. I'm good. That's
I'm
it.
so glad you're not running again. Be spousing all stuff out.
You are too. Yes.
Anybody else?
So just to be clear on that, so we're already moving into our summer curriculum, is what you're saying?
We're rounding the corner.
Around the corner, yeah.
Yes, we'll get there soon.
How many do you have left to catch up?
So,
That was my question.
Yeah.
I'd have to get back to you.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean.
I have it
you
on a
threw out
board
an
in my
idea.
office. I have it on a board in my office, and that's really what I go by. That's how I have to keep track of it. If I had to guess, you probably are about maybe 11 or 12 away from entering now into the summer grouping. Which is another 16. So you see what I mean?
So it's 27 that have already.
And then the fall will be ready.
But I don't recall it ever being, and that's not reflective, I don't remember that ever having that kind of lineup, so that's
The
why.
reason why is because we instituted curriculum writing during the school year when it
Right.
had previously only happened in the summer. So that's why we're starting to see, this is the result of that.
Then I think we should take another conversation to make sure that we're on the same page, so you're not being, so we know where we are in line, and maybe, just, I'll try and make the next committee on learning meeting. I wasn't aware of all of that, so, okay.
Anybody else? All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous? Abstain?
Opposed.
Opposed, okay. And any abstentions, okay. So 810. All right, we're going to move right along to tuition rates. I need a motion to approve the tuition rates for 2019-2020 as follows. New Milford High School, $13,371.63. Scotticoke Middle School, $11,537.26. Sarah Noble Intermediate School and the elementary schools, $11,491.76.
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Eileen?
We cover this in operations, of course, and particularly the high schools, when I was looking at in particular, the rate's gone up $20 for this year. I mean, our expenses are, that's hardly covers our expenses to do it. So I just thought and Mr. Genone said that the same formula as previous years, maybe it's time to look at the formula that we're using to charge these tuition rates. And of course, you all know that all the tuition we get in goes to the town. It doesn't come to us, and we educate the kids, and it goes into the town. Yeah.
Angie?
How many tuition students do we have?
3.
That's what I thought.
We
Okay.
have 3. And I could be wrong, is some of this, the criteria off of a basic formula?
Yes.
Yeah. But to your point, the tuition does go to the town, does
Yeah, it
not.
does.
I do appreciate the memo on this, with kind of the budgetary numbers. First time I saw it like this, it's pretty helpful. When you're looking at 14, 15 and prior years of some of those numbers, I think that's always helpful. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? Oh,
I just wanted to make sure people understand, this is not the same rate that we charge the Sherman students.
That's
That is a
correct.
different tuition number.
okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Passed unanimously. Okay, moving on to D, New Milford High School graduation date. I need a motion to approve the New Milford High School graduation date for 2020 for Saturday, June 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m.
A lot of twos and zeros.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Brian, did you?
But it's okay.
Oh, you moved it? I'm sorry. I
That's
didn't
okay.
hear you.
You can take the second if you want.
Brian, Angie? Okay, any discussion?
Question, will Westcon let us set that date now, or no? Can we secure the
Yes.
venue?
Yep.
Okay.
We just needed board approval. I don't even know if they're holding it. Are they holding it?
That's a coveted date, on Saturdays.
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Has it also kind of worked out, Greg, too, like, that districts are, kind of had taken their slots?
For the most part.
Okay.
I know that there's been some angst about some of the schools across the state lines taking a couple spots from some of the schools, and that's causing a little rift with Westcon. But for the most part, everyone seems to have their order.
Okay. Good. Yeah, because this has been pretty regular for that
Yeah.
slot for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, passes unanimously, thank you. All right, moving along, E. Is it Celtic or Celtic? Celtic?
Celtic.
Celtic Energy. All right, I need a motion that the board designate Celtic Energy as the owner representative for the New Milford Public Schools Board of Education to negotiate with energy service companies, ESCOs, on behalf and to develop energy savings performance contracts, ESPCs, that can fund future capital improvement projects, and to authorize the board chair to sign the service agreement with Celtic Energy on its behalf.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Point of reference, thank you for the information prior to the board meeting, certainly appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? It's unanimous, thank you. Item F, capital 5-year plan, capital reserve withdrawal for the 1920 budget. This is revised. I need a motion that the board request that the town council and board of finance approve $352,500 from the capital reserve account to fund capital items that were removed from the 2019-20 superintendent's proposed budget on 1/31/19, when the board approved the 2019-20 Board of Education adopted budget.
Boy, that's a thorough motion, so moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll let you go.
I voiced my concern at subcommittee. I understand the need for some of this, but I always have angst about our capital reserve account getting so low when we get hit with an emergency somewhere in the school year. And the rebut to that is, well, we go back to the town council, and that can often be a difficult and challenging thing with different philosophies between council and here. So from that point of view, I'm not going to agree to this. I'm not going to get into details of where I want it picked out, but I always have concern about us pulling that much out of there. And one last thing, on a capital 5-year plan, and this is the minutia, and I can't believe I caught this, but in the year 23-24, it sounds like out of a song.
It's 25.
The gym ceilings are down for $45,000, and not this school year, I haven't been in a school, but last year I was in a school, and perhaps, if anybody's in the high school gym, look up.
Maybe not look up.
I don't know. I don't know what the mindset was when it was done, but they decided to paint those ceilings almost 20 years ago. And the best paint doesn't last 20 years, and it is peeling off. It hits the floor. They're constantly sweeping up. We were out of lead paint back then. Yes, we were. Because that was around 70, 72 that we were getting away from lead paint. So at least that's not a problem. But it's embarrassing. The buildings, to me, is still brand new and beautiful. And we're still going to wait for the year 23, 24 to address it. That's unfortunate, perhaps. And for the discussions, we should move that up. I mean, from $45,000 to make those ceilings. I mean, go in there. You're going to end up staring at the ceiling for a while like you're watching the stars, because it's fascinating. See how much that stuff's
The other thing too, if the chips are coming down, it's going to be a hazardous safety issue. Somebody steps in playing a basketball game and goes flying, you know? I mean,
It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate we're that far out on addressing it. With that,
Wendy?
I understand your concerns. I think, we obviously, the capital reserve is something that has been a collaborative formation through this town. Was the original request in our January budget $422,000? Is that what we cut out of there, or is this the original amount? When we adopted the budget and we zeroed it out?
The original amount was higher, was the 422,500.
Thank you. So when the board adopted its budget, and, opinions can change, that shouldn't hold you to anything, the board made a conscious decision at this time, in order to get a lower operational budget and send a lower budget to this town, that they would zero out the capital reserve account and recognize that we'd go back, reevaluate it, especially in light of a new technology director, and submit a revised plan. I'm comfortable with this revised plan. We've gone back, we've lowered the amount, we've reevaluated it, we've had conversations with the town throughout the budget process, throughout other meetings with capital and collaboration on capital. They know it's coming. That doesn't mean that they can't not approve it, but they know this request is coming and we've worked on it. And with your concern about capital, accounts getting so low, that worries me, whether there's 600,000, 700,000 in that account. We do have an end of the year balance, which will help bring that account back up should this go through both those bodies. So I would hope that this would pass, because we do need to get these projects done.
Any further discussion? JT?
So it's really helpful to have page 4 of the budget position. So 678,824 is the capital reserve right now.
Yes.
Right? If we were to take this 352, brings us down to 326, 324, but then we'll see the next exhibit, we're actually looking later on for motion
And the
to
next
add by
motion.
365.
The next
Which is
motion.
actually a little bit, almost a wash, right?
Yep.
If both of these were approved. So I think it actually is helpful to bring both of these to town council, Board of Finance at the same time, because then they can see
Yep.
that this is a fluid account that we've been able to use and fund the things that are important to maintain in the district. And again, I appreciate too, Kevin, having the 5-year capital plan. And it's just that, it's a plan, but at least it puts things on the radar, and doesn't let them sneak away like oil tanks or, right, over time. So that's really good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Anthony.
If I could just add to what JT said, the current balance is the $678,000,
Yep.
$678,000, and if we were to approve this request with the next one for deposit, we would land at 691, roughly, 691,000.
That's why he's the number guy.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? One?
And that's getting rid of swag. Fly too. Swag.
Oh, you do both? You're doing both?
Multitasking.
Okay.
Multitasking.
All right, and any abstain, so we are 810. Thank you.
Did you abstain or oppose?
Abstain. I'm
Oh, no,
sorry.
you opposed.
Opposed.
He
I'm
opposed, he
opposed.
opposed, 810, yep. And swatted the fly in his
It's really
opposed.
giving me
Yeah, 'cause they-
Item G, 2018-19 year in balance. I need a motion to make a request to the Town Council and Board of Finance that the year-end balance for the 2018-19 year, subject to final audit, go to capital reserve.
So moved.
I will second. Discussion. Go ahead, Wendy.
I'd like to make a motion to amend that request in the
Okay.
amount of, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion in the amount of $50,000 from the end of the year balance of 2018, 2019, subject to final audit, going to the munis account 430-2000-495-510-00006 for the turf field replacement, with the remaining balance being placed in the capital reserve.
Second.
May I speak to that?
Yes.
We began this, I believe, last year was the first time that we had done this, I believe. Was it also 50,000?
Yes.
Okay. It's difficult because, we do rely on our capital reserve, but we also, when the turf field was brought into our community, the board had conversations recognizing that somewhere down the line, we're going to have to help fund it. And those years are starting to tick by. I don't happen to know what the town has put in by any chance into that munis account.
I'm not sure either.
Neither, I'd be curious to
I
find
think
out.
they did pass something.
They did, and I hope they continue to do so. It's a community project, so that is why I'm
Yes.
making the motion. And to keep that fund, being built up.
Joe?
That it's important that we at least contribute something to that, generally speaking, from when we put the fields in. It's about $1 million replacement cost for the carpet, which would be $100,000 a year if we get a 10-year life out of it. Hopefully we get a little longer, about 12, 13 years, given the quality of it. And this prevents the situation of getting 12, 13 years down the line and them trying to figure out where to come up with $1 million overnight. So hopefully the council understands that, appreciates it, and contributes to it, because it was the town council that put a tremendous effort into getting those fields approved, built, and to what they are. And we still, I think, we're the leader in the state on our athletic fields. And it's something to be said.
I feel like I'm always asking this question, but I'm going to ask Wendy, because I know that you're also anticipating, or anxiously anticipating a meeting. Is there a meeting?
Oh, the turf field
The
meeting?
turf field
There is a
commi-
turf field meeting. It is September 24th at 2 o'clock.
All right.
2:30? Oh, I would have been there early. Yes, and we'll report back.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any other discussion?
We're going to vote on the amendment first?
We have to vote on the
The motion
amendment.
is amended, right?
The motion as amended.
Typically, last year we voted on the amendment first.
And then the motion is amended.
As amended.
Yeah, we closed the motion. Yep. So we
Okay.
vote on the amendment, and then we go back and as amended.
Okay, so all in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, and then the original motion, right? The original motion?
amended.
As amended. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Let me just catch it. All right. We are at item H, Hill and Plain School, Excel need. I need a motion to approve one additional morning Excel classroom for Hill and Plain School. I will move that. Any second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Go ahead, Wendy.
Briefly, this began in operations, and I appreciate all the data that you brought forward. For those of you that are not on the operations committee, I would encourage you to ask any questions. We had a good discussion regarding this and the supporting data to fund this. And although sometimes these changes happening at the beginning of the school year, they're brought to our attention, and I'll support it. You know, it's something that we hadn't particularly planned on, but the need is here, the numbers are justified, and I think we have an obligation to support it.
Just so that everyone is aware, so according to the minutes of operations, it's about it's a little under
The number.
100,000.
Thank you. Okay, that's what I was just asking.
Yeah,
And
so
she
it's a
goes,
little
how much?
under
Yes.
100,000, right about there.
Yes.
And what it is for a .5 full-time special education teacher,
Correct.
3.5 full-time para-educators that work 4 days a week, 3.5 hours a day, and then, of course, equipment, materials, and furniture. So just in case anybody is wondering, that is what that funds.
And just to that point, exactly, and thank you, because I chaired operations and I just assumed, and I apologize. Are we calculating the benefits in that number as well?
Yes.
So that's the all-in number. I
Yes.
just want to be clear in case there's some questions on that.
Okay, is there any further discussion or questions? JT?
Question maybe for Laura. We always talk about kindergarten being a really hard number to pin down because that's a volatile number. We've got to think this birth to 3 number is really hard to pin down too,
It is.
because
Mhm.
these evaluations are just happening and kids are
Mhm.
just coming into that program, even before they're going to Excel, right? So would we have any other foresight for the birth to 3 from, local schools, or, would we have any other, like, we do a good job shaking the trees at the preschools to try to find what we're gonna have for kindergartners, but for this, is there any way for us to better foretell that?
Typically, birth to 3 does their own evaluations, and then they notify us once they have a candidate that will be turning 3, because once they're 3, they need to let us know so that we can have a program and an IEP in place if they qualify for services. So at that point, that would increase our numbers. Sometimes we know maybe a year ahead, very rarely do we know that far ahead. Typically, it's more 4 or 5 months. Like, we have referrals right now, children who are going to be turning 3, 4 of them in November, December, January. We know already that they're receiving birth to 3 services. They're more than likely going to qualify for an IEP and very likely will be in our programs. So those are the ones that we know. We also have people this past summer that have moved into the school district. Those are definitely unknowns. And then occasionally we'll get a referral from a preschool, and sometimes we'll get parent referrals. They haven't had their child, maybe evaluated, maybe the pediatrician hasn't pointed anything out to them, and so they've referred. So we still have that child find obligation to go through the evaluation. They may or may not qualify.
Okay. but it's all, like, a lot of those identifications are happening well outside of our budget window,
Oh, absolutely.
right? So that's why
Absolutely.
when we see this, oh geez.
Yeah, it would be irresponsible of me in January to say, I know that we're going to be having an increase of a .5 or a full-time Excel preschool. It's a number that you just can't determine that far in advance. We did this 4 years ago. We had to increase a .5 preschool. When they were 3-year-olds, we had a 3-year-old program. That bubble or group moved up to 4. We moved the teacher up to 4 with the staff.
Okay.
And then the following year, the numbers went back down again. So that could be the same type of pattern.
And are these numbers here that we're looking at, the HPS and the NES numbers, 23 would be, is that saying it's 23 identified students, or is that 23 students, including identified students plus age level peers, or I don't know?
Identified. Special
Okay, wow,
education,
okay, all right. So then those are distributed amongst,
Mhm.
right, okay. And what's the terminology
So
there?
there's
with the
2 in
age
each
group?
school. So there's
Okay.
2 3-year-old and 4-year-old programs at Hill and Plain and 2 at Northville. And so what we're recommending or proposing is an additional 3-year-old program at Hill and Plain.
Okay. Thanks.
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. All right, so now we're at item 11, which is item for information and discussion. We do not vote on these because these are over for the summer. At our next meeting, we will go back, the board will go back into approving these. So you have all that to look at. Monthly reports, budget position, purchase resolution, request for budget transfers. Are there any questions?
Oh, no, it's further down.
It's for the what?
It's further down the agenda.
Okay.
The only other thing after this is adjournment.
Well, we have the direct donations.
Oh, oh, you're not taking them all, I'm sorry.
No, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm going one by one.
Okay,
I
okay.
can take them all if that would be easier for
So
everybody.
you just put out personnel right now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Any questions on personnel?
It's early on in the year.
Okay, and then we move to monthly reports, budget position, purchase resolution D 726, and request for budget transfers.
There were no real questions or concerns at operations. That doesn't prohibit the board from asking questions, no?
Anyone? Okay. And then direct donations and fundraiser report.
I'm just curious, do we have any mechanism for, especially the student activity accounts for sports, to ensure that the money the students raise is spent on the students who raised it?
Oh, you mean not just on the sport, but on the
Well,
students?
I mean,
That's a
like
good
if, like
question.
if I'm a senior and
Raise this
we had a
money.
huge fundraiser and, we have this money, or we, because like PTO, we try to ensure that the money raised by the students is spent on the students who raised it.
For that year, yeah.
But do we do
Yeah,
the same
that's a
with
good
this?
question.
Yes, there are sub-accounts within student activities connected to any of these fundraising reports, and I think there was questions about one that came up at operations, run as a camp versus a fundraiser. So I had spoken with the athletic director, I don't know if Mr. Shagru had spoken with the athletic director as well, and from the information we were able to find out, that was run through the Booster Club exclusively, not necessarily through New Milford Public Schools athletics. So that's why it wasn't on my radar, and I couldn't really respond to it the other evening. But that was not run through New Milford Public Schools. Those camps have to secure their own insurance. That's one of the reasons why often those go through the Booster Club.
And would you have accounting information on that?
No.
Okay, because it's done separately.
Yeah.
So if I could just,
I'm sorry, can I just?
Yeah.
So I really didn't get my question answered. So, like, just looking at the list, girls, boys tennis, snap race, tennis program apparel, 11, 17, 44, that's the balance. So that's the balance going into the fall. So apparently some students at some point raised this money, but it just carried forward. So was the money not spent? If I had a senior last year that raised money for that, did he just not benefit from his efforts? Greg's got his hand up.
Let's take, for example,
Yeah.
if a particular sports team has a car wash.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, and they need to raise $500 for their apparel, and the car wash raises $900.
right,
So their fundraising goal was met. They exhausted those funds, they've encumbered them. But yes, indeed, there was $400 still left over, that carried over. That's how that works. And for example, with the camp, what Anthony was talking about, those sub-accounts in the booster accounts, the student athletes and the coaches have access to those as well.
Right, okay, so, okay, all right.
So are they dog-eared, you're saying, for a specific, if they're...
I know what she's asking.
Well, I'm just, my concern, and I speak from, I'll give you a personal example. My son was on the soccer team.
Right.
2 or 3 times they raised money. Never in the course of his 4 years did they ever spend the money. So
Well, that's-
why are we
She's
raising
right,
money? I
yeah.
get two questions, why are we raising money if we're not spending it? And is there a certain protocol or procedure that maybe the coach didn't know that money was available?
Two things, and I ask that question every time I sign off on a fundraiser.
Okay.
Why are we raising money?
Okay.
People just love to raise money.
They said that you're
You have to have a fundraiser, and I say, for what? And they go, and it's like, that's like a foreign question. Well,
They weren't ready for the hard question.
Figure out what we're doing, what we're trying to raise money for, so, yes, so those are questions that are asked. I can't comment on individual coaches or what was spent and what wasn't, but there are protocols and procedures in for fundraising, documenting those fundraisers, and documenting the funds that are logged into our student activities accounts as well.
Thank you.
Can I just piggyback on that? So this came up at operations. We had received in the last month or so a list of some of our accounts. And there was some commentary at operations basically of not that there's a concern of the accounting piece of what is coming through, but some of it's the communication piece where, we might want to do, what are we doing and how are we doing and how can we do it better? Because you're right, there is fundraising out here. So I went back and I reviewed our policies and looked at the regulations, and you're absolutely correct that when someone comes to you with fundraising that you sign off on, there's what's the intended use? What's the expected revenue of that fundraising? What's the purpose of that fundraising? So we have those mechanisms in place with our board policy and our regulations, but we do have accounts that's a perfect example. There's monies being carried over, how's it being communicated? Do you have some parents saying, well, we did a car wash and I never saw the jerseys, or you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I think it's a good conversation to have. I'm curious if it's not too much paperwork, and if it is, please just be very honest. Is there a way that we could get, how many fundraisers do you think that you have signed off on since the end of school until now, would you say?
Oh, wow, I couldn't venture a lot.
That's why I'm, right where I'm going, yeah.
I probably signed off on maybe 3-4 a day. So I have, one of my assistant principals just tracks all fundraisers. We have a calendar in his office that tracks fundraisers so people aren't stepping on each other, so we know who's raising what, making sure that the Form 1 gets brought to me, I review it, gets signed off, gets sent to central office.
That was my next question.
The follow-up is, okay, once the fundraiser happens, we want to make sure there's a proper accounting. Form 2 gets signed off, I sign that off, and it gets sent in, so the central office has basically what the projected or the goal
Right.
to kind of, and then what actually was. And that goes for even if a fundraiser is canceled.
Gotcha.
For example, a couple of years ago, might have even been last summer, I don't know when it was, maybe there was maybe car washes and we were in a drought. I canceled that, so obviously that narrative is never good, so we canceled those, but those paperwork was still completed and filed to kind of for accounting purposes as well.
And when you see those accounts, Anthony, now so that comes off of your, I knew that there were quite a lot that you do see and sign off on. I've heard this before, this isn't anything new, that request comes through. Do you have a protocol that you go back and check the activity in that account, meaning when is money drawn out of that account, and how does that work?
Yep, all those checks require mostly a signature for
Correct.
myself, or in lieu of myself, the superintendent, along with the principal at the location. And what Mr. Screw was just describing was the 2 forms that was distributed that we talked about when it was distributed at operations.
Yes.
And once those forms come back to us, we track the forms separately. Then the deposit, the actual form, we track separately. separate from the deposit and the withdrawal from any of the student activity accounts. So we're usually running about a week behind. So but we're pretty up to date with being able to, if you wanted a reported operations
Right.
for everything through September 30th, we could do that pretty easily for you.
It wouldn't be too cumbersome.
No, because we log them, as Mr.
So that's the
Drew
last
said.
thing we want to do, is I left my own.
No, it's okay.
I may ask for
When
that
the
at next-
actual activity is requested, we track that form, and then when we get the form back, that shows actually what was anticipated to
Right.
be raised in revenue and what we actually received, and the signatures. We're pretty much running about a week behind on the forms, depending on how many we get in a week.
I personally think we have a lot of checks and balances in place, and there are a lot of requests. It's not that conversation, but I do think some of this is communication. I do. And when you hear some things in the community, on fundraising and things like that, I think we have our policies in place. So, I'm really happy that we're bringing this information forward because, as you know, when you hear some concerns or questions, unless you address it and have the conversation, it just continues to grow. So I look forward, I'm glad we're having this. So.
And I would like to really point out for the minutes that total donations equal $102,292.03, and total fundraisers equal $161,256.14. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And this is money that's not accounted for in our budget. This is for things that we need that we cannot fund in our budget. So we're thankful to the PTOs and to the boosters and all these organizations that raise money to pay for the nice to haves that we
the
just
community
can't
who's-
fund here. Absolutely. And again, it is our community, it is parents, a lot of parents and families who are doing these. And so kudos, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and that's why I do think, again, when we have these conversations, just to review what we're doing, how we're doing it, and if we need to do anything better, it is a lot of money.
And I love
it's a
that
lot
we
of
got,
hard work.
yeah, and I love that we got this list. I think it's important for us to really look at it and talk about it. So thank you for that. Is there anybody else? Okay, and the last thing is textbook preview. Joe.
I was going to say, thank you to Mr. Corporal for this gift. That
Wait a minute, how much is that
issue with
book?
accepting gifts.
8709, buddy.
But should I destroy or lose it, it's $87.09 I'm paying to the district.
And your diploma will be withheld.
That's the discount.
I'm actually looking forward, and I'm very pleased. I was told that I have more than a weekend to read the 1,000 pages. And I will try to get through
Try
as much of
teaching
it.
it in a year.
U.S. history excites me, and I'm, looking forward to seeing what the updated books have to say. And thank you.
And he will return it so anyone else can preview
Yeah, well,
it.
yes, I will. I
Fun
will try
weekend
not to
for
take
Joe.
4 weeks every and I have to travel this weekend, so I don't know. I'll
There
get
you
through
go.
it.
They have it on tape.
Audio,
That would be incredibly nap-inducing.
An interesting point on that issue, and I know we brought it up. Uh-oh, see, you should have never said anything. I know we brought it up before in the Board of Ed, perhaps years ago. And I know textbooks, I like them. I like the newspaper, the feel. But modern day is getting to more of the digital. Are we still seeing that textbooks in a digital format are as expensive as the hard copies?
So I asked that question of Mr. Holmes, who led really the textbook review process with the department. The students actually prefer to have the textbook in their hand because they're navigating several primary source documents and listening to audio as it's being told from different vantage points in history. And so the ability to manage the audio, let's say on your Chromebook, while looking at the printed primary source documents in text was really what the kids wanted. And so that is the direction that Mr. Holmes decided to go. I questioned him several times. Is this just the textbook? Are you sure you don't want the online component? And he said, adding the online only adds such a tremendous expense, and we just don't feel it's necessary. So.
And we were allowed to carry this in a book bag.
But not on your back.
Huh?
Not on your back.
It's a heavy book, but I'm looking forward to reading it.
And I did want to say, because this often comes up, that the number of textbook copies that are there, 320, are based on the 3 years of enrollment that we see. So our current enrollment is 330. Next year, we're looking at 327 kids, and then 2 years down the road, 355. So
Evan, please return to the main office. Evan, please return to the main office. Thank you.
Is Evan still in the office?
Evan's Michelle's son.
Evan's Michelle's son.
He's checking things, he got bored of us.
It's supposed to be in the back of the room.
It's okay, he got bored of us. He's
Oh,
going
there he
solo.
is.
That's all right.
He's like,
We're
Get
good.
Michelle.
Mom's looking for you. Sit down.
Do you order extra copies just in case?
So what's nice about this company is that they're providing 100 copies free to the school district for the purchase of the 320.
Okay, good.
So we'll have the additional text we need to meet the kids' needs over the next few years, and then additional. But, I mean, we haven't purchased a textbook since 2001, I believe. We can't get that textbook anymore either. So they followed the right path. They wrote the curriculum, which you approved tonight, and now they, you know, at the same time, they were looking for a textbook that was gonna balance it, so they didn't write the curriculum to the textbook. But this will enhance what they have in print that you approved tonight, so.
Thanks.
Okay. Are we all good? Any more questions? Any more? Okay, motion to.
I move.
So moved.
I'm in favor.
All in favor. Thank you, everybody. Any opposed? Thank you all.
Where's that thing?